Yes, love's a secret weapon. Yeah!
Hi, I'm Donna Loren.
And I'm Dr. Adam Gerace.
And you are listening to Love's a Secret Weapon podcast.
Welcome back to Love's a Secret Weapon podcast. And today we're revisiting a very special interview that we conducted a little while ago in honor of a very special person celebrating their birthday, Donna's husband, Jered.
Happy birthday, darling. And I hope all of our Love's a Secret Weapon community enjoys listening to our conversation that we had quite a while ago in behalf of Jered's birthday coming up on April 29th. Happy birthday.
We were standing in the moonlight, my lover and I, on a red rock summer night. As he held me in his arms, caressing me tenderly, my heart told me this is right. He's the one, my lover, my very best friend. I want him to make me his missus. I'm the one for him, I'll do no wrong to him. Only wanna have his moonlight kisses. As he held me in his arms, caressing me tenderly, lighting up all the stars in the sky. Oh, one came shooting by, caught his eye, oh, deeply penetrated as the hours passed by. He's the one, my lover, my very best friend. I want him to make me his missus. I'm the one for him, I'll do no wrong to him. Only wanna have his moonlight kisses. He's the one, my lover, my very best friend. I want him to make me his missus. I'm the one for him, I'll do no wrong to him. Only wanna have his moonlight kisses. The one, my lover, my very best friend. I want him to make me his missus. I'm the one for him, I'll do no wrong to him. Only wanna have his moonlight kisses.
Dr. Adam, we have a very special guest. All of our guests are special, but this is my love of my life, my dear husband, Jered. Jered, thank you so much for participating in Love's a Secret Weapon podcast, and especially in this part of our life where we are actually launching into what we now know is many decades of living and loving together. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're with Dr. Adam and I.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So I wanted to begin by saying that ultimately Jered's Aunt Anne became my aunt.
Mm.
And as I was reading, she was just a very honest woman, you know. I mean, in fact, the entire Cargman clan just had that trait, you know, that was so different from the way I was raised, never trusting what was coming out of somebody's mouth. And so I guess we can begin there, and I'll ask Jered, when we went back to Los Angeles the first time to attend a wedding, and your Aunt Anne invited you to have lunch. So can you tell us a little bit about that day?
Yes, she invited me to see a new place that her and Lou had moved into, and it was a big deal for her. And so she took me there, and I got to see it, and I got to see Lou's artwork.
Can you explain what that place was? Wasn't it the Steven Spielberg Animators Building?
Something like that. I don't remember the name. Yeah, it was a place for, I guess it was only animators? Okay.
Artists, yes.
Yeah, artists in show business.
Mm.
And there was a waiting list to get in, and they'd waited quite a long time. And then they were able to get in, and they were both very excited about it. And Lou's art was being featured in the hallways, and he was very proud of that. And then after that visit, we had lunch, and Anne asked me basically how serious Donna and I were. And I said, serious?
Mm.
And she said, well, I have something to tell you. And that was when she told me that Maury was not Donna's father. So she went into a little more detail about the family secret. And
was it hard on her?
I think it was kind of a letting go for her.
Mm.
I think it was something she'd been holding in for years. And I think it was healthy for her in a way.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, then she asked me, are you going to tell Donna? And I said, I think I'm going to have to.
Mm.
And it turned out that I told Donna pretty quickly. I mean, it was something, I was bursting. I couldn't hold it in.
Mm.
So, yeah, that's how that went down.
Yeah. And then this is an additional part of that particular story that was really not included in my memoir that I'm reading. But something very odd happened subsequently, where the next day Jered and I were planning on returning back to Hawaii, and I managed to get a brief visit in with my daughter Katie, and while Jered was visiting with his Aunt Anne, and we were at Hawaiian Airlines at the airport, and just waiting to board, when we heard what you don't really want to hear, a voice over the intercom in a airline, you know, Jered Cargman, come to the telephone. And we were looking at each other because the plane was just about to board, and Jered went and received the call. And who was it?
It was Lou.
Right.
Yeah, and he proceeded to tell me that Anne had had a heart attack and had died.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
I really think, you know, I mean, this is just, you know, my feelings toward Anne, whom I've known for many years, you know, because we were all connected in family, and that she was the type of person to have held back so much for so long that when she had a chance to not only share this information with Jered, share the truth with him, but also be so, excited about elevating her life with her husband, whom she had been married to for 12 years, but had been dating for 22 years before. So, and all of the artwork that he had accumulated, all the paintings that he had done from their travels and whatever, were just sitting on floors stacked up in their previous apartment. And now they were on display for the public to appreciate and she was just so proud of that accomplishment that I think her heart just burst of joy.
That way. It really did.
Yeah.
She wasn't ill. There was no precursor to that happening.
It just happened out of the blue.
Seemed that way.
And then, of course, the kind of family that I was aware of that my adopted father came from, going back to the story of how he lived in an orphanage with his brother Lou, who was 3 years older than him. They are victims of, a childhood that had been interrupted dramatically. And, by the illness of their mother, for about almost 5 years. So, what happened on the phone when Jered came back to tell me this is that my Uncle Lou asked Jered to stay in LA and handle the situation.
I was the executor of her estate.
Right. Yes.
I would say that, the child within him was so bereaved that, he you know what I'm saying? The part of him that had never been able to grow up, he reverted back to, and was asking for another adult to kind of take care of the situation for him. And Jered and I looked at each other and we said, nope, we are going home. I love my Uncle Lou. He was always so kind to me. But, if he's looking for that kind of support, he has 2 daughters and he'll need to reach out to them.
And I think that shows the use in a really difficult time of some very healthy boundaries. I think we've spoken about this before, this idea of in families, there are often not necessarily healthy boundaries. And certainly, Donna, your family, I think we've spoken about that before, and having the ability to know what needed to be done at this time and what you both needed. Because Jered, I guess for you, I'm interested that, knowing you for so long, I know you wouldn't be able to keep a secret like what had been divulged to you. But was there any conflict in once you had heard this to know what to do with that information that Aunt Anne had given you?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. But I knew I had to tell her. There was no question in my mind, but it was, it was like when, how, etc.
All the other adverbs, right?
It's like, how do I do this?
Yeah. You're sitting there, you're like, is it now? Is it not now?
Yeah.
He did it in the most loving way he could possibly do it, just very direct. But it was kind of interesting, though, that we were sitting in this rental, in the dark.
Yes.
I mean, it was literally like being in the dark and coming to the light.
Yeah, it was, and I couldn't have started the car and left without telling you. No. There was no way I could have done that.
No, that's when I mean, we had only been living together for a few months at that point, and but that's when you know that you have a bond that is so strong that, again, getting back to unconditional love. That's how I felt that however he delivered the message, it was the truth, and that's what mattered.
And did you, I know,
Thank you.
as you were talking and as you started to discuss how this did send you into an illness, but you did say when you heard that news that you felt you were breathing the truth now. So as traumatic as this was it almost not an instantaneous sort of insight, but you knew once you had heard this, you could take it in some way straight away?
Yeah. Adam, it took me literally about an hour. I think what happened is I went, immediately I responded in a way or reacted in a way that was familiar, within my family. Immediately you become the victim and then you start blaming and all of that. And I did do that in the beginning. I thought, well, they're just trying to hurt me again. And by saying a lie, and because it was so hard to believe that this man that I called Dad for 48 and a half years wasn't my father. I mean, it was just completely stunning. And but when the truth resonates in a certain, I guess, vibration or frequency, my perception was, no, it only took me an hour to realize, that this was a huge, what do you call it, epiphany. This was a huge pivot in my life, not just a new relationship and a new location and so far away from everyone and everything I knew, but literally an internal revolution, that would help me ultimately to get to know myself better and clear away all of those layers and layers and layers and layers of buildup that I lived with my entire life until then.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this as we progress through this chapter, because it isn't something, while you had that revelation relatively quickly, it then took a lot of time to process this and to work through it and to continue to process it and work through it. But at the time, did you equate, I know we do now, but did you equate this illness coming on as a response to this trauma and this stress of what had been revealed?
I think I was suffering physically too much to realize that I was in shock. I just know that, that's physically, I had a major reaction and I did not know, what the source was or what to do about it. And thank God, I had the guidance from Beverly, my counselor, to point me in a direction that actually liberated me.
When you just give love and never get love, you'd better let love depart. I know it's so, and yet I know I can't get you out of my heart. You made me leave my happy home. You took my love and now you've gone. Since I fell for you, love brings such misery and pain. I guess I'll never be the same since I fell for you. Well, it's too bad and it's too sad
snub me. But what can I do? I'm still in love with you. Well, I guess I'll never see the light. I get the blues most every night since I fell for you. Since I fell for you.
You know what I'd like to do while we have Jered here in our presence? I'd love to go back to the prom.
Yep. So we're going back to 1965.
Yes, in January and winter class of 65. And as my friend Janice explained, you know, that to me, that Mr. Paney, my music teacher at Venice High for a year, asked for me to come back and sing at the prom. That would have been the prom that, you know, I would have attended if I had stayed in school. So when that moment came, somehow Aunt Anne intercepted and took the opportunity to introduce Jered and I. I was 17, Jered was 18 at the time. And I just remember getting dressed, you know, almost like another job, because I was going to sing for my prom. You know, I was, you know, I mean, I was putting on a show for the prom. And, but here comes this young man with his J.C. Bring hairdo and this spiffy, you know, slim, tall, black, you know, suit and a corsage. And he fastened it around my wrist, which was very romantic. And then Maury, in his inimitable way, said, "Okay, stand over here." He had a place where he
break out the camera. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Let me take a picture. And
we have that picture to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed we do. And then Jered took my hand, and his hand was trembling.
I was very nervous.
Take us back there, Jered. What were you thinking then?
I was just like amazed that I was there with her. I mean, that was like every young man's dream, and certainly mine. And you know, it was love at first sight, I have to say.
Right.
We had had a brief, I won't call it date, but kind of getting to know you. Just prior to that, we went out for a drive. I guess it was a few days earlier, and so we'd already met. But yeah, it was like I was like, how is this even happening?
I can still feel Jered's hand trembling. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, I was like,
it was so sweet. And then by the time, you know, we left my house, and that's all kind of a blur.
For me too, actually. Yeah.
We really didn't have an opportunity to relax and enjoy.
No, we didn't. We didn't. And then, of course, I was nervous the whole time.
Which is usually the way, yeah.
And I wasn't much of a dancer as a teenager. So I was nervous about everything.
That's exactly how I felt at mine. Don't worry.
I got you there, and I got you back.
Yep.
It's like a dream come true. Oh, my love, I owe it all to you. Yesterday, I was a little girl
Yeah, and then the magic of just knowing each other.
Mm.
We've in and out for years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
platonically. I mean,
Right.
but we were always otherwise engaged with other people, other
Yeah.
occupations.
Right.
Because why don't you just mention starting a business at a very early age?
Mm.
Well, I started kind of entrepreneurial as a kid, so
Yeah.
I started doing mail order and things like that. And then at 13, bought a printing press
Wow.
that my mother gave me half the money for, and I had half the money for.
Mm.
And I started doing printing. This was in the days of letterpress,
Yeah.
Used
Yeah.
handset type, and started to, get some jobs doing that. 13,
Right.
14 years old.
What
and then,
sort of jobs were they? Who were they with?
business cards, little things at that time,
Mm.
like business cards and things like that.
Mm.
I still have a book, kind of a photo book with samples
Fantastic. That's great.
of the days. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Like a
to
little
look through it.
scrapbook?
It's like a scrapbook, yeah. And then my brother got interested, and he was 2 years older, and he took an interest and saw that we could actually have a business
Mm.
doing this at a young age. So then we got another press and a motorized press, and enter my aunt again, my Aunt Ann,
Mm.
who was a bookkeeper. And at that time, she was working for a small chain of restaurants. And there was a need for that restaurant to have printing work done, something called menu writers back in those days. The little daily specials that were printed on these little sliding things that slipped into these plastic holders right inside the
Mm.
Excuse me, was that Carolina Pines?
Carolina Pines restaurants
Yeah, I
in
used
Los
to go
Angeles.
there.
Yeah, at LAX, which is where she worked.
Well, I used to go to the one in Hollywood.
And we ended up printing for the restaurant, which was a really, really good gig because there was really one main menu printing company in Los Angeles, Lord Menu Company, and they had the whole market, and they charged very high prices and were able to get it. So we charged quite a bit less and did very well. And so we kind of specialized there for a while. And then we started doing we were doing mail order printing, all kinds of, letterheads.
And this
is
is
after school.
I was going to say, you're still in school when you're doing this.
Print shop in the garage.
Wow.
So my brother and I moved on to a business that we did for 21 years after that, which was a retail called WBS.
And what was that business, Jered?
Well, it started out as a buying service. Wholesale buying service was the name, where we would have people contact us and tell us what they wanted. Basically, they'd know a make and a model number, and we'd get it for them wholesale, which back then wasn't being done. There was no wholesale back then, to the public. There were no discounters in California.
Right.
So it was a novel idea. And what it grew into was a kind of a premium high-end department store selling high-end products at lower than retail prices.
And I have to ask you, some of your sound equipment that you use today came from that.
That is true.
And they
That is
weigh a
true.
ton,
Yeah.
but they still work, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What is that? What's the name of your receiver?
It's an amplifier. It's a NEC A10-2.
For any of you who are music buffs, you'll probably know that piece.
They'll know what it is, absolutely.
Yeah, that one's actually from the early 1980s.
Right.
And it weighs 60 pounds.
Worth
So that
every
means
pound.
to be playing heavy metal, but it's just
Yeah.
playing heavy rock.
Yeah.
And I'm interested, that sounds like quite a novel idea at that time to get into this. Did this just naturally progress from you dealing with businesses, or was this an idea that you both came up with? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, I'll go back a little further.
Yeah.
We were still in high school. We were printing, doing well. And we were working with another printer who had the newer, latest equipment. It was getting into lithography, photographic printing at that time. And we were still doing the letterpress. And when we needed to do some lithography, we would use this other gentleman's company, basically, and he'd help us out. And it turned out that he had a very going business and doing very well. And he had one son, and he wanted his son to take over the business, and his son didn't want to. He wanted to be a doctor or something. And so this gentleman approached my brother, who was the older of us, and said, would you like to apprentice with me and eventually take over the business? And so it was decision time. And, you know, my brother said, I don't want to have printer's ink under my hand the rest of my life, under my fingers. You know? And so it was a point at which we made a decision that we would, you know, stop printing, but we wanted to do something else. So we had I call him an adopted grandfather. Lou Machat was his name. He was probably in his mid to late 70s by that time. And he had a little business going where he had a desk in a retail store, not a big store, a private store though. And people would come in and ask him to get things other than what were sold in this store. And he paid them some percentage or something and had an agreement with them. But nobody was doing anything like that at that time. And it gave us the idea to do something like that. So that's how we started. And it was a buying service. And then I was 16, my brother was 18, and, you know, we rented an answering machine. You couldn't buy them back then. And we were still in high school. And we used our printing to design a flyer that we sent out to everybody that my parents ever knew. A few hundred people. And we mailed it out. And lo and behold, we got a few phone calls. And that's how it all started. And over the year, this went on for 21 years, but we ended up, you know, renting a location and then eventually stocking merchandise and buying from other dealers because we were just kids and we didn't have any credit or anything. And but as time went on, we started to buy directly from the manufacturers. And we ended up with a store that was a membership store. Before there were membership stores. And our customers were the aerospace industry employees, the airline industry employees, and think tanks like Rand Corporation and JPL, Continental Airlines, American Airlines, Hughes Aircraft, went on and on. And we called them member companies. And what we were offering was to be a perk for their employees. So it was something they could offer their employees, and they loved it.
Right. Yeah.
There was nobody else doing it. This is pre-Costco and pre-Price Club and all of those companies in the U.S. that came later. And our membership was quite unique. We had 50,000 members, and they were active. That was families. 50,000 families. We had a long list of companies that wanted to join that we couldn't accommodate. We didn't have a facility to do that. And, you know, we eventually, the last 10 years, we were in a building in what was called, it's still there, the Marina Airport Industrial Park, which was at that time across the street from Hughes Aircraft. And all the Hughes employees used to come over during lunch break. And most of them were engineers and were not on the clock, so they'd sometimes stay for hours and see the latest products and all of that. It was.
Didn't you get to go to Japan a couple of times because you were selling?
We won trips.
Equipment?
Yeah, we won trips from Minolta and Litton Ovens and Barrett Panasonic and other companies. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it was a unique business. It was you kind of picture. A discount store like a Costco in the United States. Is Costco in Australia?
Yeah, we've got it as well here, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, Costco started as the Price Club in San Diego, California. Saul Price started it. But we were way before him. Fantastic. And but that's a discount warehouse store. We were not. We were basically looked like a department store. We had carpeted floors.
Well, wait a minute. I'll tell you.
displays.
Jered allowed me. I mean, members of my family would say, "I want to go and shop," and he would say no. But he let me come there one time.
Well, you were special.
And thank you. And so I can tell you that it was kind of a phantasmagoria kind of place where you entered, and it was a huge, huge building. But you entered into kind of I want to call it like a tunnel of love kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you walked through this dark passageway and through, you know, almost like the Emerald City, and all of a sudden it glowed. And, you know, all of the various departments you could visit. But where the cash registers were had a big Lionel, I think it's called Markle, the big trains.
Right.
That
I forgot the name of those.
That the German, you know, train sets, and there was an upper track that went around the perimeter of this entire building and delivered the receipts to the cash register.
Well, the merchandise, actually, the small merchandise.
Oh, like jewelry.
Like from the jewelry department, we needed a secure way. The shopping was different. In other words, people didn't carry anything. And everybody checked out at the back at the end when they were done. And everything got written up along the way. So as if they bought a ring in the jewelry department, then the ring would go in the train, and the train would take it back to the rear of the building where the cashier was.
That's tremendous.
Yeah, there was all kinds of little things like that.
And the other thing that I want to bring up is that Jered and his brother Stan had a consciousness, even all the way back then, which probably started in the late 60s or early 70s, for metaphysical awareness. And so they developed a book department that catered to that and tried to introduce that to these kind of, what would you call them, businessmen that were...
Well, we were dealing with really a lot of engineers and professionals and people that were, you know, building bombs and things like that.
Especially in that time,
in the aircraft industry, and so there was not a knowledge of what metaphysics was about. It wasn't something they'd been introduced to, and we decided we wanted to introduce them. So we opened a book department, but we only carried art books and metaphysical books, and it was quite successful. We'd get letters from people, you know, saying that they bought a book there that they never would have seen anywhere else, and it changed their lives and that sort of thing. So it was really cool.
And that's fantastic. They were receptive to that as well. You know, being engineers and stuff, you sometimes don't think of that in that way.
Yeah. And
well, after he kind of, you know, introduced them to the sound systems, and they're listening to, you know, like Moody Blues or, you know, or whatever.
Sure.
And then they wander through the book department, you know, maybe their minds are more open. I don't know.
We were doing things like, we would do quarterly promotions through the mail. They were catalogs, promotional catalogs, and each one had a theme. And sometimes the theme would be about peace, and sometimes the thing would be about, you know, sustainable farming. And this is in the 70s, 80s. And so we were introducing people to, and it didn't really seem to hurt our business at all, which was interesting, because I'm sure there were many, many people that were not interested in those things at the time, but there were people that were, and they would tell us that they appreciated it.
Yeah. And then Jered's brother Stan went on to developing a metaphysical retreat in Hawaii on the island of Maui for quite a few years, and had all kinds of speakers and people from all over the world attending and having retreats there to enlighten himself as well as guests. And then suddenly, you know, as Jered's and my life kept interweaving themselves, you know, his brother suddenly died at a very young age. What was he, like
44?
44.
Wow. Yeah.
And I just happened to be there, you know, not when it happened, but there in Jered's life as a good friend and support, to, it just happened to be that way. And that's kind of the way our lives have been,
Yes.
is we kind of just show up when we, we've needed each other, I guess, for support.
Right.
Mm, mm.
Through our divorces together.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm interested in, because I know, Donna, you spoke to our listeners about this, particularly in the 70s, where you sort of honed in on a lot of alternative, at the time, what was considered sort of alternative modalities. Where did this come from for you, Jered? Was this something that you and your brother pursued? Was it something in your family?
It was
Yeah.
not in the family,
Yeah.
no. It just kind of came naturally. I really can't explain it. It just was a direction that we both went in separately.
Mm.
Yeah, he went more into Eastern mysticism,
Mm-hmm.
maybe less for me,
Mm.
especially in the beginning.
But when
But
did you change your diet?
That was started in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And then,
Because I don't know how Jered does it, but he's been pretty much a vegan, maybe because I like eggs and cheese sometimes. Break down and have an
Well,
occasional egg.
yeah, I was vegan for many years and vegetarian for many years. And I would have to say I'm more vegetarian, but mostly vegan.
Yeah.
But that's been 45 years at least now.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of before it was in vogue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Difficult to find things to eat in restaurants back then.
I was going to say, like, now it's much easier, but back then it would have been near impossible. They probably wouldn't have even known what a vegan was.
I know.
Yeah.
I've given Jered a nickname of the biblical grain man because his staple is quinoa or millet, or what's the other one?
Oh, well, amaranth's the other
Yeah.
alkaline grain, but
Mhm.
And but the bulgur wheat.
oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
Buckwheat groats.
buckwheat groats. There we go. Yeah.
I'm interested, Donna. I think you mentioned this in another one of the podcasts, but also one of your interests, Jered, with your brother, as well as a very close friend, was of course music. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
When did you meet Phil?
Oh, my friend Phil. I met when I was 13, and I moved from Hollywood area to the Fairfax district in Los Angeles. And started going to John Burroughs Junior High School. And Phil was going to John Burroughs. And so that was in the second half of the 8th grade for me, or for both of us. And that's when I met Phil. And
He had already been writing songs at that time?
Yeah, most of the listeners will know Phil as P.F. Sloan, who went on to write Eve of Destruction and Secret Agent Man, the two most famous songs he wrote. But yes, he was, when I met him, he had already made a record at 13. And then I went with him when he was 15. I was 14 to Mart Records, where he made his second record. Knocked on the Door, and Marty Melcher and Doris Day owned that company.
When did you start singing harmony with Phil?
Probably pretty soon after we met, probably within a year, I would say. And so I would always be the first to hear the new songs that he was writing, and then we'd record them. I'd usually sing background with him. Or
Where did you
harmony with
record
him.
them?
In his bedroom.
Okay.
On a Webcore tape recorder.
Wow.
And,
Did you ever do it at Gold Star?
well, not that early. This was real early on.
Okay.
That came later, with other things that happened.
Okay.
That's when I was, 16, 17, 18. And then when I was 18, Phil was already a staff writer with Screen Gems Columbia and Dunhill Records. And he, one of the projects that they were doing, he and his writing partner, Steve Barry, was putting together a surf band, because the Beach Boys were hot and Jan and Dean was hot. And they were writing for Jan and Dean. And the record company wanted to do some surf music. And so they put together a surf band. And Phil invited me to join that band.
Called?
The Fantastic Baggies.
Yes, but Now, I know a little bit about that many years later because I heard Phil tell the story that he called it the Baggies originally, but Mick Jagger was in the studio when they were recording and he popped in and he liked it and he said, "Fantastic." And so they became the Fantastic Baggies.
Yeah, that was good for DJs
Yeah.
commercially to say, and now the Fantastic Baggies, and everybody thinks they're fantastic.
It just works. You've set the intention. But
And they still are. And they still are.
Hey, Mom and Benny got the guys from my baseball team. Ever call me on the phone to ask me to play in an important game? Just say their captain ain't at home. Tell them I'm surfing. Don't care about hitting home runs. Tell them I'm surfing. Have me some fun, fun, fun. I'm trading those batting balls. They'll see them in the ball. I'm going surfing. And if that pretty little girl from across the street who's been bothering me for days to go swimming in her pool, well, her pool's real cool, but it hasn't got 10-foot waves. Tell her I'm surfing. She's a mighty, mighty cute girl. I'm surfing. Shooting the girl. If she wants my company, I'll be out and wave and say I'm going surfing.
so tell us
Yeah.
about the recording, Jered. Tell us about the recording as the Fantastic Baggys.
Well, let's see. I
The
was-
members of the band. if
the
you can
members of the
remember.
band. Yeah, well, it was myself and Phil and Steve Barry and another schoolmate, Bob Myman.
Mm.
And
Where, at what studio?
I
No?
don't remember.
Okay.
It was probably Gold Star, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
And basically, I was background singer,
Mhm.
and all of us sang. Well, Bob Myman didn't sing, but he was a drummer.
Mm.
So, and we were kind of prepping to go on the road and hopefully have a hit record. And we did not know that the record company didn't have that in mind. So we were getting airplay in Los Angeles and in San Diego and
Mm.
wherever surfing was popular.
And
with a-
also another continent.
And well, South Africa. Yeah.
I heard this. So South Africa, you were popular in South Africa for a while.
Well, the music was, yeah.
Yeah.
We went there. In fact, we never toured, but Phil thought we were going to,
Mm.
and then they said, no, this is a studio band, and we'll put together a group.
It's kind of like
know,
pre-Monkey.
It was like the Grassroots, that
Yeah.
band, other band in that era. That was done the same way. That was Phil singing lead on everything pretty much, and along with Steve Barry writing most of the songs. And they were the Grassroots. And then when they had hit records, Phil was told to go to San Francisco and find a group
to tour.
to
Yeah,
tour.
to tour.
Yeah. And then that group went through more than one incarnation. The first group was not the group that it ended up being, but it was the same thing with the Baggies. We didn't know that they were, that we weren't going to, if there was going to be a hit record, whether we would ever actually tour. So Phil told me, well, you better learn to, we'll need a bass player. So I started taking bass lessons. And Bob Myman was already a drummer in high school. So that would have been the band.
And Steve Barry, what did he play? Guitar or piano?
No, he was, I think he might have been keyboards, but he was writing, in the early days. I think he did most of the lyrics of the early songs,
That makes sense.
and Phil did most of the music.
Yeah.
And so the record company, which was that Imperial or was that someone else?
It came out on the album came out on Imperial.
Yeah.
Adam, you always do your research.
Yes.
Right on.
And then it was later re-released on Liberty. But the actual company that Phil worked for was Dunhill Records.
Yeah.
But it didn't come out on the Dunhill label. Yeah, so that was that.
The tail is real narrow and the rails are thin. It's over 10 feet long with the red and white fin. Yeah, my big gun boy. You wanna see her now, my big gun boy. big gun board. You ought to see it take a drop, and it really goes. And I gotta walk a lot before I hang 5 on my big gun board. You ought to see her now, my big gun board. She take 35 feet, and the ride's real sweet on my big gun board. The guys are real jealous, and I know why. She's the fastest gun around, and she really flies. The honey sure dig her, they say she's choice. She's the best of the board, she's a real Rolls Royce. And before a kamikaze, gotta get some speed. And my big gun board gives me all that I need on my big gun board. You ought to see her now, my big gun board. She takes 35 feet, and the ride's real sweet on my big gun board. She's the best of the board. She's a real Rolls Royce. And when I gotta catch a wave and I need some speed, I know my big gun board gives me all that I need on my big gun board.
Yeah. And then much later on, after Jered and I became a couple in 1995, Jered reunited with Phil after a very long absence of whatever Phil was going through, whatever Jered was going through. And then they bonded again. And I was privileged to witness these two before Phil's sudden death about 7 years ago. We stayed with him for the last 2 weeks of his life. And about a week before he passed, he picked up his guitar. And we were three of us, I'm sorry, including the guitar, four of us, we're sitting around his little dining table. And he said to me, which was the first time in 20 years that I knew him, sing me an Elvis song. So I'm like, okay. So I started Can't Help Falling in Love with You, and he said, don't tell me the key. I can just find it. Just start singing. So I did that, and he played beautifully. And then when that was over, I said to him, okay, now my turn for a request. And so I requested Everly Brothers' Bye Bye Love, and man, they locked into their harmonies like they were never apart. Jered and Phil, and oh my God, they were so sensational, and Phil's energy just like catapulted and played guitar like sensational.
Yeah, that was special.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And because the Everly Brothers were I think both of you were very into that growing up.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, we listened to, he's a composer, but we listened to a lot of music together. We used to get records together. We'd go to radio stations and
Oops.
And no, we did. Since I was printing at that time, I made up letterheads, West Hollywood Boys Club letterheads. There was no West Hollywood Boys Club. And, typed up a letter and saying we were having an event and we could use records. And the radio stations, got all those demos. And they didn't need them all.
Promo copies.
Yeah, the promos, the white ones. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they just give us stacks of records. And we'd go home, we'd audition them, and we'd keep the ones we liked. And I don't remember what we did with the ones we didn't.
And a little known fact that Phil shared with me as well was when he was 16 years old, he was made head of A&R at Dunhill Records. And that meant that he was in charge of artist and repertoire. So what came across his desk one day was a copy of Love Me Do by the Beatles. And he went to, what's his name?
Lou Adler.
He went to Lou Adler, who was running the company at the time, and said, you better sign these guys. They're great. And as other companies did, they passed.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of ear Phil had.
Yep, for sure.
And that was Lou's a bad decision, but
Well,
did you ever meet?
every other record company got them too, and
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And
It's in show business, you have to be so resilient and take the refusals and the rejections and just keep bouncing back. Be persistent if you're really committed to your art form and to your passion, right?
Yes.
yeah,
Sure.
and was there ever a thought, Jered, of pursuing the music side of things, or by then were you sort of so ensconced in business it was like, no, this is what I'm
Yeah,
going to do?
I started in business as a young kid,
Mm.
and that was my passion.
Mm.
I did entertain the thought of the music business, but from the business end, I never saw myself as a performer.
Yeah.
And I really did not care for the way, the experiences that I saw. How can I put it?
How you were exposed
Yeah,
to
what I was exposed to. I really didn't care for.
the tactics.
Yeah, it was not compatible with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there were many people in the music business that were wonderful, but my experience was, I just didn't
Resonate.
Didn't
with
resonate
you.
Mm.
Yeah.
with the business end of it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I stuck with what I knew best.
Mm. And to know that as well, not to necessarily be dragged along with that, and okay, I guess I'll try this, but to know this isn't for me.
No, I knew right away.
So I have to ask you, honey, what the music that you loved then and the music that you love now?
Oh, many. I can't even name them all.
Oh,
There's
fantastic.
There's so
Okay.
many. Yeah, so many.
And of Phil's music?
Well, I would want to play some of Phil's music that's not that well known.
Mm.
Give us a name.
Raised on Records. That's the name of an album
Mm-hmm.
that came out in 1970 that virtually unknown. And the song Raised on Records is a really, really great song, but the whole album is wonderful.
Cool. Well, we love obscurity.
Yes, absolutely.
We're always trying to discover something new. So let's play that.
I was raised on records. Has changed my life many times. My father, he bought me a guitar to keep me company. I didn't see him much while I was growing up. Understand, I love that man eternally. I was raised on records, rock and roll radio. I was raised on records, and if it wasn't for the music, wasn't for the music, I might have said goodbye a long, long time ago. Long, long time ago.
And now we've played it. Jered, honey, I know that, this is not something you usually do.
It is not.
But I say that you mastered this interview beautifully. And
Thank you.
And Adam and I really appreciate your time
Absolutely.
and your love of life, and the way that you've chosen to live your life has been so honorable, and I love you.
And I love you. And I love you too, Adam.
Same. I love you too. I love you both. And it would be great to hopefully be able to see you both very soon. It's been a while in person, quite a while.
It's been a while.
Oh, yes.
Mhm. I do remember, just quickly as we wrap up, I think we went to I think it was a Dick Van Dyke Show 50th reunion, it might have been, at one of the theatres.
At the Egyptian.
And that's right. It was the Egyptian, wasn't it? And it was the three of us and Phil. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I didn't remember that.
Yeah. And I think it was Dick Van Dyke, Carl Reiner, and I think Rose Marie was there. And
Oh my gosh, Carl Reiner was just so amazing, and just loved that guy. Loved him.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, thank you again, Jered, for joining us. That was a real pleasure. And
Thank you for allowing me.
Absolutely. You know, you're so involved in the podcast in the sense that you're a very wise and critical ear for what we do. You're often there when we are recording, and of course you do all the promo and everything that we just know nothing about, and you do it so well. So we appreciate all that, and
back to his marketing days for his old
Yeah.
business.
And we'll be hearing more about that as we progress the chapters on the business that both of you started in Hawaii, but not to preempt that too much. So until next time, everybody.
Yes,
All
and
right.
thank you for listening to Love's a Secret Weapon.
Nobody can say okay like you. Nobody can touch my heart like you. Nobody can thrill me like you do. That's why there's nobody for me like you. Nobody can kiss me like you. Nobody believes in me like you. Nobody thrills me like you do. That's why there's nobody for me like you. Nobody can say okay like you. Nobody can touch my heart like you. Nobody can thrill me like you do. That's why there's nobody for me like you. Nobody for me like you. Nobody can say okay like you. Nobody can touch my heart like you. Nobody thrills me like you do. That's why there's nobody for me like you.
Yes,